Welcome back to Lessons I Learned in Law. This week I'm joined by Shelley McKinley. Now, Shelley is in Amsterdam this weekend from Seattle, battling jet lag, so hats off to Shelley. She does a great job getting through her 3 lessons and sharing some amazing practical insights. Shelley is Chief Legal Officer at GitHub, which is a business that is owned by Microsoft. She's also Vice President at Microsoft, where she's been for over 19 years. So since she joined GitHub in 2021, she's been heavily involved in the first commercialization of generative AI, working closely with governance and regulation of that product and how it shapes and impacts the business's wider approach and how it adopts generative AI. I had a really cool conversation about her journey in her 19 years at Microsoft, what it takes to succeed in a business like that, how to be visible as a lawyer within that team and create a network internally within your business. And we also spoke about changing regulatory landscape and how it's important to adapt to change and be resilient to grey areas and operating within grey areas, because she's done a lot of that through her career. And if you're a lawyer working in-house and you're not yet using and adopting AI, then some really good practical tips for getting started and how to dip your toe in the water. So hope you enjoy. Hi Shelley, thanks for joining me.
Hey there, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
How's things? We were laughing before we started recording. So you're into Amsterdam. How long have you been here?
Let's see, a little over 24 hours now. Landed yesterday at 7 a.m.
Amazing. Well, thank you for battling the jet lag and heavy eyes, no doubt. But yeah, you've spent. This is a return to Amsterdam. You were here before.
Yeah.
For how long were you here for?
2 jaar.
2 jaar. Nice.
2 years.
Yeah, I got it. Even my Dutch is improving.
Yeah, there you go.
How has it been back?
It's great. I love being in Amsterdam. It's just such a beautiful city and just so much energy.
Yeah.
And it's even though it's windy and rainy and not very warm today in June.
Yeah.
But it's still just such a lovely place to be.
Yeah, it's nice. It's definitely got its charm.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a nice year actually. The weather's been it's been dry, and the last week or so hasn't really been reflective of how it is, but at least the sun's out.
You're like originally Dutch now. You talk about the weather all the time.
I know. No, that's British. that's my Scottish roots. Yeah, I don't have anything to complain about. So I've given the best introduction that I can, but it'd be great just to hear and start with a bird's eye view overview of your current role and where you're at.
Great. Yeah. So I'm currently the Chief Legal Officer of GitHub.
Cool.
GitHub is a developer platform, AI-powered developer platform, with the industry-leading GitHub Copilot AI developer tool. Those are things we're probably the most famous for at the moment.
Yeah.
We're also a wholly owned subsidiary of Microsoft since 2018. I've been at GitHub for 4 years.
Cool.
Prior to that, I was at Microsoft and have been at Microsoft for 19 years.
Nice.
Wow. It's been a journey and through a number of different roles over those 19 years.
Yeah, I bet growing through that business, never a dull moment. I imagine a lot of change. Yeah. So like the move 2021, did that coincide with? That was launch of Copilot.
Yes. Yeah. So in end of June, July 2021 is when we launched GitHub Copilot to tech preview. Yeah. To put that in context, you have to remember that is an entire 15 months ahead of the launch of ChatGPT and the time when sort of responsible AI, generative AI, all of these things went from really being kind of academic discussions and dev teams, but they weren't around your dinner table. And you suddenly have your mother calling you up and asking you what generative AI is. So that was 15 months after we launched GitHub Copilot. So it took a little bit for people to actually understand what I did.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, because it's just like the blink of an eye since you mentioned ChatGPT being on everyone's tongue and being the norm now and generative AI. How long this is a totally uneducated question, but like, how long is it a thing that is like this is getting to that crescendo, and when does it become a huge thing and I guess in the public domain? Or
well, it just depends on what it is. I mean, I think what we've learned in the last 4 years since the launch of GitHub Copilot is this is coming at us a lot faster than we ever thought it would. And so now we're already on to agentic AI. That's like the next thing. Generative AI, now agentic AI.
Right.
And so, but the speed of release of things it's just accelerated, and it's just kind of coming at you so much faster than it ever did. So you're kind of, shall we say, building the plane while you're flying it a lot of times, particularly in the legal departments.
Yeah. Must be an interesting viewpoint being an end user plus someone that's seeing it coming to fruition and everything that's going on.
Yeah, so ours was the first, and it was really kind of fun to demo it for people in our department, in our bigger department at Microsoft, before they'd really started working on what's of course now Microsoft Copilots, and we were very proud that they adopted our name, Copilot, the Copilot name. But it's a developer tool, so as a lawyer, I'm not really a developer. I took a couple of classes in college, but I haven't developed in a long time, or maybe ever that was anything really useful. But I had to learn a little bit about how to use it so that I could demo it for other people. And I had my GitHub Copilot, so my Copilot helping me, but I also had like a friend, phone a friend, actual developer helping me at that time, because although it's all like about natural language prompting to generate code, you still have to have a good understanding of coding and what you're doing. At that time you did. And so, but we're now seeing that move from really what they're calling like vibe coding now, which is another thing. You think you've missed a trend, and then when you look up when it started, it's like it started in February. It was named in February. I thought, oh my gosh, how did I miss this trend? When I was looking it up in March, and I didn't miss it. It just started. But so the idea is like over time, really natural language programming for real becomes possible.
Yeah. It's cool. Yeah, there's so much change, so much going on. Hard to keep.
Hard to keep up.
Hard to keep up, definitely. And where's home?
Oh, that's like the hardest question you're going to ask me today, I think. Where is home? I've spent probably half of my adult life, maybe a little less now than that, in Europe. Lived in Austria, Germany.
Cool.
I've lived in the UK. I lived in Amsterdam. So I've spent a lot of time here. I grew up in Texas.
Okay.
So that was, kind of all of my, as we say, like primary school and high school time, and I went to college there.
Okay.
And since that time, I've lived in Seattle. So the place I've lived the most of my whole life is either Texas or Washington.
Okay, nice. And it was the music that took you to Seattle.
It was. Yes, I was following grunge.
Nice.
I mean, I was really, everything was happening in Seattle in the 90s. And that was, I didn't really, as kind of a girl from the suburbs of Dallas, I didn't really know anything about Seattle other than all the music that was happening. And of course we knew Boeing, but we didn't really know where that was. And it was just kind of a cool place that you couldn't even imagine, because you were just not from anywhere close to there. And so I thought, that's cool. I want to check that scene out.
Nice.
That's how I made it.
Doc Martens on, and
Yes, that's right. My cherry Doc Martens. I had them. Yep.
Nice.
Those were the.
Yeah. Hopefully, still got them. Nice. Well, thank you for that intro. Keen to hear more about everything that GitHub and Copilot is doing. But we'll jump into if you could share your first lesson.
Oh, my first lesson. Okay. Well, my first lesson is maybe along the lines we were already talking about, which is everything is coming so fast.
Yeah.
It's really hard to kind of make sense of it. And so I think my lesson is there's always something from history that can help you adapt to the present.
Okay.
And so when we were looking at AI and thinking of all the things we needed to think about launching an AI product, there aren't laws that are written around that, or at least there definitely weren't at that time. There were certainly some AI laws that were being considered, the EU AI Act, but how does copyright apply to AI? How do all these legal principles apply? You just have to kind of look back at the last technology change to start thinking through how did we think about applying existing laws to new technology. And so there's always something you can learn from that.
Yeah.
There's still also a lot unknown.
Yeah, I can imagine. What do you find has been the most useful thing or last big change that's the most useful to draw upon in a legal context?
I think when we think about music streaming, that was also something where nobody really knew kind of what was going to happen, and there were a lot of fights and debates and a lot of politics around all of that. And so just to know that's going to happen and understand that sort of over time, the law is going to catch up. And so you really have to make your bets. And you may not be right about those bets.
Yeah.
So.
And operating in those, there's a lot of grey area in that space. How do you encourage junior lawyers? How do you prepare them to work in that uncertainty and adapt? It's
interesting because lawyers are supposed to be working in uncertainty, actually. Applying facts to situations and trying to figure out what the answer is. But lawyers, I think, sometimes are uniquely afraid of uncertainty. They just don't like it, actually. So, lawyers look at the facts and do the analysis and come to the conclusion. And so I think it is really hard. The things maybe that makes you the type of person that would go to law school are interestingly some of the things you have to unlearn a little bit, I think, to be a good lawyer. And you have to, the context is always so important. And so you have to bring together law and context and experience to deal with ambiguous situations. And I think, one of the things I would tell new lawyers is there are very, very few things that are actually going to sink your career or your company. And we get really wound up in that, I think, as young lawyers, worrying about whether I made the right decision, especially in these vague areas. And then there's also make the best decision you can, because the problem is if you don't make any decision that has any risk in it whatsoever, you'll probably also never get any business. And so learning that over time, that in some ways you'd rather have 20 lawsuits than no lawsuits and no business. So operating in those areas it's challenging. I wouldn't want to be a junior lawyer trying to do it all by myself. So I think it's great. You go to a law firm and you have other people you can work with. You go to a company and you have other people. And now, I will just admit I learned most of my copyright law off of Wikipedia. Because I didn't take a copyright class in law school, and I had to, when I had one of my first jobs that was really all about copyright, I didn't know anything about it. I had to go look it up and figure it out. So it's all possible.
What was the transition like going to Microsoft in a place where that grey and pushing boundaries and challenging as a business? How did you adapt to that? Was it a shift in mindset and how you applied the law and worked? I think when I first came to Microsoft, I was probably a little afraid of technology. I had come from the really creative side of copyright at that point. I came from Hasbro, a subsidiary of Hasbro. And so going over to the really software side was very confusing, honestly. I normally just didn't know what anyone was talking about when I stepped into the office in the morning for the first few months, because all the words were new and the concepts were new. And so it's really important at those times to take a step back and actually learn. Learn something, learn about technology, get really curious about what your business is doing, what your clients are doing. For example, I started supporting the Xbox hardware team at some point, and I thought, how am I going to do this? And I just got online and I bought a book called Hardware for Dummies. And read it. Along with Wikipedia.
It's not that I'm saying go to Wikipedia and get, you don't need that instead of lawyers. But what I'm saying is smart people can read and learn stuff.
Yeah.
And then take, the rest of your judgment. And you'll make some mistakes, but again, if you don't make mistakes, you're not learning.
Yeah. And to be like in an in-house role, it's the subject matter expert is being able to advise at a high level, I guess, with your stakeholders to a certain extent. And a lot of advisory work on that. What is I read a lot around, or I see a lot around, like legal functions utilizing Copilot and AI. How does Microsoft's legal function and GitHub, what sort of application, or what's your top tip for a legal function in terms of utilizing it?
I guess I would say my top tip would probably be get started.
Right.
I think people get a little bit stuck with they need to go from using, like Word and Office to suddenly, having entire AI systems do their entire job for them. And can get overwhelmed really quickly with that notion. And so sometimes we actually just need to do one thing, and sometimes that's not even AI. Sometimes it's just actually organize your documents in a common form in a database so that you're starting to get ready for AI, or institute some more simple processes that you'll be getting ready for AI. But those things actually help right away. So there's all kinds of technology that lawyers don't necessarily use very well. And so taking that jump to AI is kind of a big step for some people. At GitHub and Microsoft, of course, we are very focused on what we call in the industry dog fooding.
Okay.
It's got a really interesting backstory if you want to hear about that.
Please.
We call it eat your own dog food.
Okay.
But I as well wondered why would they call it that? Why do the engineers call it that? And there's a television commercial from back in the 70s or something, I guess, where the owner of a dog food company was touting the quality of his dog food, and in fact he ate it on this TV commercial.
Right.
So saying it's such high quality, I will eat it myself.
Wow.
Anyway, that's how it got started, but that's what we try to do, is we try to eat our own dog food, and we want to use our own tools.
Yeah.
But we also have to be careful, and we do. And GitHub, we're on a bunch of different systems, so we are a limited integration subsidiary. We use all kinds of different AI, and I think that's really important while you're eating your own dog food, to also be experimenting with other people's.
Right. Yeah.
Because it helps you put your own products into context.
Yeah.
Very important as a lawyer when you're being asked to advise on some piece of technology. You need to understand how your competitors are approaching the same thing. What terms of use are they using? What risks are they taking, to the extent you can suss that out? Because it's always fun when you're sitting in a meeting and you're seeing someone advise on, on something we absolutely can't do, and they're like, well, wait a minute, why is our competitor over here doing exactly that? And you'll find you can get yourself caught in a situation where you think, oh, you have to say, I actually didn't know. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've spoken. There's a couple of people in Amsterdam that I know that are at Microsoft, and I think they've done sort of educational and training in the legal market, and in terms of showcasing what the Copilot can do.
Yeah. I got off on a little bit of a tangent there. Yeah, we do have a ton of training.
Yeah.
And we see contract drafting, first draft, or a term sheet. AI is a fantastic use for that. Researching things. Parsing large amounts of data.
Yeah.
It used to be really hard to say which customers have we provided X term to, and now you can run AI over something and get those answers a lot more quickly.
Yeah. How do you get over the fear of where's the data going? Like putting it into AI.
I think that's important when it's kind of a know your vendor.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you read those terms of use. We do have a process internally for permitting our businesses to use different types of AI from different companies based on what they're doing with data.
Yeah.
Because there's the stories early on about sensitive data being fed into AI systems that could then be made disclosed via an output if the model learned on that. Those are some concerns. I wouldn't say they've become a big concern. I think training AI models is a pretty big business.
Yeah.
And so they're not being like trained every day.
Yeah. Cool. And that switch from the role at Microsoft that you previously held to GitHub, what was that transition like?
So I've had a lot of jobs at Microsoft. I did about everything in Xbox for a while, for 6 years. And then I came to Europe for 5 years. At the role right before GitHub, I ran, essentially it was called Technology and Corporate Responsibility for Microsoft. Not a legal job at all.
Right.
I ran programs for things like accessibility, broadband connectivity, sustainability when we released our really industry-leading sustainability commitments at Microsoft. So I really was running programs.
How did that come up?
Well, it's funny. I have it came up because I was the president of the company called me and asked me to do the job. When he called me, I thought he was calling me because he knew that I have a master's in sustainable development. But it just turned out he thought I could do a really good job of managing a big team that was tackling tough problems. And I was like, this is great because it really aligns with some of the stuff that I was always interested in around human rights, sustainability, all these areas. So cool. It was a wonderful 4 years in that role.
And that was back in Seattle.
That was back in Seattle, yeah. That's what I came back from Amsterdam to do in Seattle.
And then some other more time, and then the switch to GitHub.
No, I finished that job in 2021. The social impact, call it social impact job, and moved to GitHub. And it really gave me the opportunity to bring everything together at GitHub as the CLO because I have all of the functions of what we call corporate, external, and legal affairs department. So I have legal, I have policy, very focused on developer policy. I have an accessibility team. I have a social impact team. These are all small teams at GitHub. We're a much smaller shop than Microsoft, of course. But also we run the trust and safety or the content moderation for the platform. So it's bringing together a lot of things that I've done over my career under one hat.
Nice. Cool. We'll move on to lesson 2.
Sure, lesson 2. Well, I guess I would say context is important, and I've kind of touched on that already. I think you can't make decisions in a legal vacuum. And it's a really important thing for lawyers to learn whether they're advising external clients or they're in-house. Is it doesn't always matter if it's legal or if it's not legal. It's not always the question, right? So I think back to when we were just ahead of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we were considering some deals with a Russian bank, and a junior lawyer kind of looking at the law, saying like, okay, no, we're fine, we can do this. These are the things we have to do to make this work. People are doing business with Russia all the time then, and so for some reason it came to me, and I said, are we sure about this? Yeah. It's totally, I've looked up, I've got an opinion. I've looked up the law. I was like, yeah. And I said, well, maybe we should, did you think about like the geopolitical issues? Or what happens if there's suddenly trade restrictions? Because we can, the news is going crazy at that time. And so putting your advice into the context of, okay, wait, how do I think forward to what actually happens if there is a Russian invasion of Ukraine and there are sanctions that come, like we need to be ready for that. So I said, tell the clients they need to wait till about 3 weeks after the Olympics, and then and then we can decide. And so it turns out that was a good decision. Because we would have never gotten paid. So I think that's really important. And you don't always, as you're saying, in your silo doing whatever kind of law you do, maybe not always looking at the bigger picture, and it's just such an important part of advising.
How I'm always like massive organization like Microsoft. How do you get that context, like the internal visibility and the internal, like building the internal relationships and knowing who to go and seek advice from?
I have 2 very different scenarios at Microsoft. it is overwhelming.
Right.
At GitHub, it's a company of around 3,000 people. So it's much easier to figure out who has the context you need and who you need to go ask about. Say we were talking about data collection earlier. Like we have a question about telemetry. I can kind of know who to go to on the product team to talk about that. At Microsoft, you have to just really dig in and work at it, and you have to network and network and network. And also, you come in with assumptions that they're like this is like organized and things will just happen. Like you'll just somehow there's a document that will tell you like who you go to for each thing, and there just isn't. So you have to be super persistent and recognize it's going to take quite a bit of time to not feel completely overwhelmed. So I'm on like 19 years with the company now, and it's still sometimes really overwhelming, and things change.
People move.
Businesses
around.
reorg, businesses move. And so you just have to try to be persistent. And I think now that we can kind of do more internal searches of documents, sometimes you can ask M365 Copilot for us, say, who does this? Yeah. And it can help you find a person. Right. So that's handy. Another good time saving.
Good dog food.
Such a strange expression, isn't it?
Yeah. I was like,
where's she going with this?
High on your own supply, given we're in Amsterdam. Yeah, no, it must make life much easier. So how, like you were the two hats at GitHub and Microsoft now, you're VP at Microsoft. How is time split? Like how do you?
98% of my job is GitHub.
Okay.
But I'm a Microsoft employee. And I also have a team of developer division, which is where GitHub organizationally reports into as a business.
Cool.
I also oversee the developer division legal work, but that's very much like product development work. And there's all kinds of other specialists that do the sales channel for those products, et cetera. So that's why it's a really small part. And GitHub is a full service shop, which is why it's really my daily role. Yeah,
nice. And those I see that in the internal relationship building and like those soft skills, like any tips for junior lawyers or for anyone really, like how do you have impact on those interactions that you have? Because I've never worked in an organization of that size or scale, but I'd imagine being remembered and being memorable for that and having that interaction and being to the point. How did you craft that in your earlier years?
In my earlier years, I don't really remember. Probably, right. I probably learned a lot of tough lessons in those years. I think you can get pretty bogged down in sort of doing just the work that's in front of you. And so, what I try to do now is set out what we go through our performance review stuff, right? So we've got our priorities and goals set, but you can so quickly get away from that, and someone's asking you to do something. And then the squeaky wheel or like whatever comes in first goes out. And so I try to reset myself like on a weekly basis probably and look back, what am I actually trying to accomplish? What are the highest impact things that I need to do for the year? How does it snap to whatever our business is doing, of course, to remain focused on that. And sometimes you have to tell people no. Right. I'm not going to do that thing that you want me to do. And realize that's also okay too. One of the challenges being in a large company is that your reputation can follow you around for a long time. And generally, of course, things that follow you around can be things that are negative. Those spread quickly. Repairing them takes a while. Just being collaborative and kind and thinking about, how this person may be having a bad day. Kind of like how do I treat them? And it seems easy, but it doesn't always happen because people are so focused on getting done what they need to get done. So I would say just recognize that you really do just need to be, treat people with care and grace, I think, as you interact. And also, though, know that it's okay to push back. Right. And, say, I'm sorry, that's not in my priorities. I understand it's in yours. Right. But clarity, I think, is one of the key things because we oftentimes we have so many people, like who's making the decision, who's actually driving the next steps. And lawyers are like chronically not great at project management.
Yeah.
So it's a learned skill. But you said, how do you make sure you make an impact? I think you have to get really aligned with your business and with your manager on what impact means and ruthlessly drive toward that because you can so easily get caught up in just the number of meetings and the number of things that happen.
Yeah. And communicate like what you're doing that aligns with that, with the impact or the drivers.
Yeah, and you do a great job writing that. We call them connects at Microsoft, or we call them reflectives at GitHub. It's also sometimes just one of the most difficult, agonizing thing to do is to sit down and write it, but it's a really important thing to do.
What's that? What was that? Sorry, I missed.
So a connect or a reflective, it's like your annual performance review. You first write yours. This is what I did.
Yeah.
These are the goals I hit. And it can just be exhausting trying to write those and think about it and look back on your year and can just feel like drudgery. But it's such an important thing to do.
Yeah.
And AI can actually help you generate a first draft now, which is fantastic. Can take some of the drudgery out of it.
Yeah. I imagine so. I think doing that weekly though, just reflecting back on like what have I accomplished this week? Because like you say, you can just get so focused on the here and now.
Absolutely.
And lifting your head up is quite important, which can then help with those reflective conversations. But cool. We'll jump on to lesson 3.
Yeah. Lesson 3, I would say, is the right person for the task should be doing the task.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, especially in-house, because when you're outside counsel, you're getting primarily billed by the hour. And actually, if you're on alternative fee arrangements, usually outside counsel are still looking at how many hours, because that's just how they've done it forever, right? And when you're buying that service, you don't want to pay for a very high-paid outside counsel to, I don't know, write up a chart for you about, to do a more administrative work. Yeah. Or to, be a PM, which they're probably not very good at anyway. What I've really learned is it's so important to have a multidisciplinary team to be able to give the right jobs to the right people. So lawyers should focus on what they uniquely do best, the legal work.
Yeah.
To have a business manager, program managers, all kinds of other disciplines that actually help drive the work that's not uniquely legal. It has a legal basis maybe, but it's not uniquely legal.
Yeah. Or
paralegals.
Yeah.
I think paralegals can do like 99% of legal work with
execution.
Again, with training. Smart people can read and learn and apply. And I think when you think about how do you drive overall efficiencies for a department, we oftentimes see that people are just doing work that they're not uniquely qualified to do, that someone else would do better at a different price point, and you come out with a better product. So I think, over time, I would love to see legal departments moving more and more and more in that direction. It does take lawyers a bit of time to get used to that, to handing things off. I started a paralegal program when I was in Europe.
Right.
And it was like, to try to get the lawyers here to understand the quality and competency of what a great paralegal could do, it just took them a while because I thought, you can't do legal work if you're not a lawyer, because it's just not, in most jurisdictions here, it's not a normal thing.
Yeah.
So that I think is really important if you're going to be successful and make the best use of your resources.
Yeah. I heard that. I was at the ACC conference a couple of weeks ago, and David Lancelot at Lawview, he was talking about like operational mindset. Like if you've done something 5 times, you're going to do it a 6th and 7th time, or you're going to find another way for someone else to do it, or to delegate that, and just having that, which sounds similar. Like the difference between paralegal in the US and like UK, Europe.
There are paralegals in the UK, but in continental Europe, generally not paralegals. They might have like a legal assistant, someone who does very administrative stuff, but a paralegal who learns, becomes an expert in generally some area of law and applies that and counsels clients. Now they are under requirements, they are acting under the direction of lawyers, but they're able to many times really answer questions that lawyers sometimes think should be reserved for them. And I think you can just get so much more value as a business.
Yeah.
And you also, the other point I was going to make is if you're outside law firm and you're getting paid by the hour, in-house, so a lot of times your clients have a real desire to push things to you that they should be doing themselves because they don't, depending on how you set up the company, they're not paying your hourly fee.
Yeah.
And whereas if it's an outside counsel, they go, I don't want to give them that. I want to talk fast and I want to, do everything I can myself.
Yeah.
But when it's in-house, it's kind of like they want to push a lot of that sometimes to the department so that they don't have to do it. It's kind of like those great M&A deals where the investment bankers are getting paid a percentage and the lawyers are getting hourly. They're trying to lower their time and push it all to us.
Yeah.
Because they get paid the same no matter what.
I know. Yeah. Just waiting for the law firms to change to that model.
Right.
Right. Yeah. The risk appetite's not there. Finding the right people to do the right job with an area that's like developing, so fast moving, arguably no one's an expert.
Right.
Yet, how do you select a law firm to go to say you're the guy?
Yeah. Well, it took law firms, we would say a New York second to get on the AI bandwagon. And plus they were all crypto experts before that, so they probably didn't have as much to do and thought we got to get the next thing. But yeah, it can be challenging. But I think again, you look back to what's come before you. So it's not just AI is a type of technology. It brings somewhat different types of risks, but it's not like they're all new. We've had technology transitions before. A lot of the data issues, we've already done, let's say, a lot of the hard work on that. It's how do you apply these laws to this new type of technology in some way. But I do find that we can develop in-house expertise in some of those a lot more quickly because simply we have more visibility to the technology. And we have to. And then we have to be comfortable taking risks because one of my lessons learned that maybe wasn't in my top 3 is, but I already alluded to it, is like you can't just wait.
You're right.
You can't wait to make a decision. You're going to have to go with some uncertainty because otherwise you're not going to get ahead. The law will figure itself out. But we can't afford to just say no. That when we shipped GitHub Copilot, and we still had that 15-month window really where we were kind of learning before things really exploded with generative AI. I created a tour that I called the FUD-to-FOMO tour.
Okay.
And because there was already a bit of FUD in the marketplace about Gen AI at that point. And issues around copyright with it, issues around responsibility, and also just a sheer or lack of understanding around what the technology is.
Right.
And I knew at that time that our biggest blockers were certainly not going to be our CFOs who are going to be excited about the productivity gains. They weren't going to be really the developer managers who were excited about how much happier their developers were going to be and how much faster they were going to be. It was going to be general counsels and compliance people. They were going to be the department of no.
Right. Yeah.
And so even if we got the sale in the door, the implementation period was going to be really difficult.
Okay.
And so we need to go out and start educating that community on AI, on what it is. And so we tried to just really make it simple. And I went on the road with one of our product VPs, and we talked to a whole bunch of counsel, internal and external counsel, who can also be like diffusers of the information to others.
Okay.
Right at the beginning.
Right.
And so we would go and...
When's this? What sort of time frame?
This was, let's say, we launched in maybe 6 months after launch.
Okay.
I knew like right at the beginning it was going to be an issue, but you also have to worry a little bit or just be cautious a little bit about not creating problems that don't exist yet.
Yeah.
Not creating the FUD, but let's say we were ready to go when it was time. And so we just found that was going to be a way to really be a leader as a lawyer, and get out in front of some of the stuff. And so we would go to we came here and did one in Amsterdam, actually. Right. And then we found maybe a year later, we went from seeing one AI event in a city a week, which was like ours, to 5 every day in every city and town and village around the world. And so then I think it was became harder to get the right number of people into a room to talk about it. So it was fun to see it explode that way. Yeah. But it was also like, okay, I think my work's done here.
Full-time lobbying.
There's full-time people out there doing that, saying the same 12 things that each other are saying. So I think we're good.
Cool.
It was fun.
Yeah, it sounds really good fun. What do you find there's any jurisdiction or sector that's particularly risk averse to implementation of AI?
It's the same ones you would imagine. It's interesting. So I think like the banking sector is, of course, they have big regulations to deal with, and it's not just AI regulation, right? It's their vertical sectoral regulations. And so they, on cloud computing and all of these things, they tend to be a bit slower or a bit just a bit more challenging from a compliance perspective, because they really, it's a verify system and they have independent obligations. So interestingly, in this one, I think financial service sector in AI and in other transitions is really eager to get the technology at the same time. And so you'll see sometimes there's some of your first people in the door to start really talking about it, and some of those sales cycles become pretty long as they get down the path of trying to buy and then implement technology. Because there's just so many regulatory requirements. And then another area where the regulation did not anticipate the new types of technology. So your internal people at those companies are trying to figure out how does it apply to what we have in front of us when it's not super clear.
Yeah. It might be outdated within no time anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Will they ever be able to be ahead of the curve? It's a bit of an impossible task. Cool. I'm asking everyone for a podcast or book recommendation.
Oh, okay. Well, other than this podcast,
I
love the Acquired podcast. Probably everybody loves that. Yeah, they've just got it's such great storytelling about primarily technology companies are the ones that I listen to. I think one of the podcasters is a former Microsoft employee. I know he is. I can't remember which one.
Eating the dog food. Dog
food. Yeah, I think he was like a PM, maybe in the mid, I don't know, like 2005 or something like that. But
a favorite episode on that.
I love the Spotify one because it's just such an interesting company, and it's of course a European one, the most valuable, probably one of the most valuable European technology companies. Yeah. What a cool, interesting story. The founders and the business.
Watched the Netflix or whatever series about it a few years ago.
Such a cool, interesting story and business. And there's a great one that I recently listened to about Microsoft.
Okay.
That tells a lot of things. I think, I was there at that time, and some of it I thought I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. But they just do such a tremendous job of storytelling on that podcast. It's really good. And my book recommendation, I actually brought a book with me.
Superb.
It's called The Meditating Mother. It's a collection of short stories, kind of putting some pretty quirky characters into some sort of normal environments and seeing what happens. It was written by my best friend from college.
Amazing.
So I'm a real fan of it, of course. Also, I am not biased about how great it is.
No.
And I'm going to give you this copy.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And her name, Laura Kopczyk.
Laura Kopczyk. She's a creative writing professor at the University of Texas, Arlington.
Amazing. It sounds right up my street. We were talking about it before recording. Yeah. Quirky and off the chart stories. I look forward to it. I'll give you my review. Thank you so much. And where's Laura based?
She's based in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay. Nice. Very good. Well, thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
I'll put a link to the Amazon link on the podcast. Yeah, hopefully she gets a few lawyers.
It's really fun. It's a really fun book. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, fantastic. Thank you for joining me and battling off the jet lag. It's been really cool hearing about your story and your background, and such a varied time in that 20 years at Microsoft alone, and loads of interesting stuff going on at GitHub now.
It's still only 19 years, but thank you very much.
Probably feels like 19 years. It probably feels like, It probably feels like 19 years on the amount of stuff that's happened since you went to GitHub Copilot and everything. That's the pace of movement.
It is coming up on 20, but I like to remember 19 years. No, it's good. Time just flies, right? But thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
It's been great. Thank you. So that wraps up another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, powered by Harriet Brown in-house legal recruitment. Now, I share these stories each week to help lawyers of all levels, and both in private practice or working in-house. And it doesn't matter if you're early in your career or you're already leading a team. Learning from your peers or from those who have walked in your shoes before, then this is the show for you. If you find it useful, I would love it if you could share it with your colleagues or share it with your network, or drop us a message just to let us know that you're listening and that you're out there. Feedback really helps us grow the show and take it in the direction that gives the most value to you, our listeners. So until next time, I've been Scott Brown. Thank you.